Welcome to Reddit Aliens. Serious. What is the creepiest experience that you cannot rationalize or explain? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I had just finished unloading a flatbed trailer full of hay, sat down on the back of the trailer, and laid back to look at the night sky when I suddenly felt like vomiting, like projectile vomiting, and there's also a plate and 5 screws in my arm, and immediately started vibrating and felt like it was heating up inside my arm. The cows around me started to run in random directions and I'm isolated, no cell service, no person around for miles, when suddenly this meteorite lit up the night sky with a blue light like it was daytime for like 3 seconds. As soon as it lit everything up, I felt better, but I could see my cows running in every direction away from me. It was completely silent the whole time except for me and the cows. When I was a kid, I shared a bed with my dad. One night, with both me and my dad in bed, the radio was softly playing a local FM station when a loud and disturbing satanic voice started mumbling incomprehensible nonsense, to me at least, for 10 seconds. I asked my dad what the hell that was as I was totally disturbed, and he told me in a serious tone he will explain what happened in the future. It spooked me, as I've never heard something like this on the radio before, and we always had the radio on most nights. I'm old enough to understand some semblance of English at this point in time, so that incomprehensible mumbling is totally out of place. I could ask my dad now, but I doubt he will remember it. Who knows? It could just be the FM station making a sex joke, and my dad obviously isn't going to explain what it means. Don't know why, but I can't forget this seemingly insignificant incident. Ask him. A long while back, when I was living with my first girlfriend, my mom came to visit. One morning, while they were in the kitchen, I was sleeping in. Was in that state of half awake, half asleep, and could hear them talking in the kitchen. As I'm lying there, in that state of twilight, I start dreaming I'm on a beach, like a cold North Atlantic beach, like the coast of Ireland or England, with a rocky shore instead of sand, and I can hear the footsteps of someone coming closer to me. I'm listening to my girlfriend and my mother in the kitchen, and at the same time I'm listening to this man approach. The whole time, I could tell the man had a sense that he could see me as well, and then the footsteps get right up to me, and I hear them stop. Then there's a pause, and then, son of a bitch if I don't feel his hand on my arm, and I sit straight up, freaked the F out, and I swear to God, I felt the lingering sensation of a hand, as if it had just had a hold of my forearm lingering. Never told anyone about this. I often wonder if, one morning, a fisherman out of Ireland was out on the beach and somehow saw me in the mist, then reached out to see if I was real. Posted this before, but way back in the day, when building plastic airplane models were a thing, my brother saved up his allowance for a month to buy this certain kit. The day he brings it home, my mother and father tell us we have to go to the grocery store, and we set off for the supermarket. On arrival back home, my brother races up to his room to start his model while the rest of us unpack the car. A few seconds later, he comes into the kitchen with a weird look on his face. Not frightened, but not okay either. He asks us, "Is this a joke?" We all have no idea what he's talking about and ask him what's going on. He repeats, "Is this some kind of joke?" Almost yelling it at us. My mom now realizes he's serious and grabs him by the hand and asks him what's wrong. My brother turns and says, "Very funny, guys. What did you do, buy another model and swap mine out for it?" My dad kind of laughed and said, "No, what are you talking about?" My brother rushes upstairs to his room and flies back down, this time with a fully glued and painted model, the exact same one he had purchased before. The box is shredded on his bedroom floor. My parents turn white, call the neighbors to see if anyone has seen the property, and start checking the rest of the house. Nothing else was touched. No doors were unlocked and all windows sealed. This wasn't the only odd thing that would happen there, but I remember it vividly because of my parents' reaction. There is no humanly possible way that model was built, glued, and painted in the time we were gone from the house. I would assume a prank by my dad, who has that kind of humor, but it probably was the only time I've ever seen him seem scared. He's never admitted to it in 30 plus years. If this was your dad pulling a prank, it's an awesome prank. But if it wasn't your dad, you're probably haunted. When I was in high school, we used to play this stupid game we called Michael Myers. It was basically just a hide and seek, but in the dark. You had to play at night with no lights on and the curtains drawn, no sounds playing, and Michael Myers had to wait in the basement for a few minutes while everyone hid. One night, we decided to play while my mom was out working. It was my brother, a few of my cousins, my friend, and my little sister was probably 6 or so at the time. After a few rounds, I'm found first and have to be Michael. I don't like being the seeker alone, so I ask if my friend can do it with me. Everyone was fine with it, so we go and sit in the basement and wait. It's important during this part that you remain silent so you can hear where people are running to give you an advantage. After the 5-minute wait time, we left the basement and stood in the office for a minute to let our eyes adjust to the dark. We left the office after searching briefly and went into the dining room. From the dining room, you could see into the kitchen in the left and the living room on the right. We were pretty sure we heard everyone run upstairs, so we started heading to the living room when my friend said my sister was hiding on top of the fridge. I look over and she was peering through the doorway from on top of the fridge. You could see her hair hanging and she was small. I assume my brother put her up there as a joke because she definitely couldn't get up there by herself. I told my friend that we would just ignore her because she couldn't be seeker anyway. So we went upstairs to find everyone else. We found my cousin first. My brother was very good at this game, and since we knew where my sister was, we just gave up searching and yelled that he could come out from hiding. We switched on some lights and he came out of hiding with my sister. My friend immediately started freaking out and asked my brother if she had been with him the whole time because we definitely saw her on top of the fridge. My brother ran downstairs, turning the lights on as he went, but there was no one down there. He checked everywhere in the house, no one. I really felt like he had to have been messing with us, but we would have heard someone moving around. The house was seriously dead quiet. I've tried to figure out everything it could have been besides my sister, but I just don't know what it was. It's really not a great memory and still gives me goosebumps. I never played the game again and was never really comfortable in that house after that. We had 2 doorbells in our house. One was the one for the front door and played your typical doorbell sound, and the other one was disconnected, no button to push. I'm at home. Mom's in the TV room watching the tube. The other doorbell rings. It rings a melody, not ding-dong. I instinctively walk to the front door and open it. We had a vestibule which had a glass storm door and floor-to-ceiling windows. I see a man in a trench coat and 1930s-style hat like Dick Tracy walking away from the house. So I go and open the storm door to get his attention, but as soon as I open the glass door, seeing him the entire time, as soon as the frame of the door passes over, he disappears. I tell my mom WTF just happened, and she says, "Oh, yeah, he's the suitor who's looking for the young lady that used to live here decades ago." I don't bother answering the door when the other bell rings. What the F, Mom? This just happened the other night. I was sound asleep on my side when I felt someone poking my shoulder real hard, sort of jabbing it with a couple of fingers. I sat up in bed so fast it made me a little dizzy. No one was there, but I could feel the exact spot on my shoulder where those fingers had been poking. Couldn't go back to sleep, and even after an hour on Reddit, I could still feel that sore spot on my shoulder. My mom told me once that the weirdest thing she ever saw was a big white dog that came toward her on the street, but when she turned around, the dog wasn't there anymore. It wasn't a crowded street or anything, it was just gone. The weird part about it is that I've seen the white dog too. I was heading down a street, and then there was this big white dog next to me. When I turned around, it was gone. I'm certain I saw it, and that it was there. I don't usually believe in ghosts, and I'm the kind of person to watch ghost vids on YouTube in the middle of the night and go to bed with no problems because I don't believe in that stuff. But that dog thing that happened to both my mom and I is something I think about often. I ordered something from eBay and something from Amazon. 2 parcels arrive, one plain and one in an Amazon box. Upon opening them, I find the Amazon receipt inside the other box. It really felt like I was in the Truman Show and the props guy had made an error. I guess eBay person could have had a spare Amazon box and used it to ship their thing, and the Amazon parcel could have been a third party. So not have had the branded packaging freaked me out for a few hours. When I was about 10, I was hanging out with my younger brother, 8 at the time, and our neighbor, also 8 male, in our house on a normal Saturday afternoon. It was starting to get dark outside, and we had the brilliant thought to break out the new Ouija board. Oh no, my brother had gotten as a present. Who bought that? We went upstairs to my brother's room, turned off the lights and drew the curtains and unboxed the Ouija board, which was glow in the dark, even better. Growing up, my brother had 3 small paintings hung on his wall, which were depictions of winter, summer, and fall. Had been hung solidly for at least 6 years when the story takes place. This is important later. We started messing around with the Ouija board, with one of us kids obviously pulling on one end of the planchette to manipulate answers. Eventually we asked, "Are there any spirits here?" and the planchette moved to yes with no obvious manipulation from any of the three of us. This was kind of spooky, so we asked, "Do you want us to stop?" And the planchette moved to yes again. Throw it away. Immediately after this, the painting on the far left inexplicably falls off the wall and glass on it cracks. We freak out, turn on the lights. My mom comes upstairs and reassures us that it's fine. There are no malevolent ghosts, just a coincidence, whatever. We calm down. Leaves to continue making dinner, and we kind of shrug and turn the lights back off to continue playing with the Ouija board. We keep asking it questions and getting nonsense answers until we ask, "Are you angry?" The planchette moves to yes, with no pulling from anyone. Right as the painting right next to the one that just fell off the wall also inexplicably falls to the ground, this time shattering the glass. This made us fully freak out. Mom comes upstairs and puts the Ouija board away, and I've literally never played with one since. Our house was old, but there was no other paranormal kind of activity, nor do I really believe in ghosts or anything, but this experience was just too strange and creepy to explain. The paintings continued to hang just fine for years after that. I know this is getting a bit redundant, but please, no more Ouija boards. And honestly, who buys a Ouija board for a 10-year-old? When I was a teen, my dad bought and sold salvaged cars as a side hustle. I would drive whatever was in our driveway at the time as my way to get around. He got this one car that I used to joke was haunted because the electric door locks would lock or unlock on their own, making an audible ch sound, and because the car had been in an accident since it was salvaged. One day, while driving with a friend, I joked about the haunted car. As I joke, I said out loud, "If there's a ghost in here, make it lock right now," and coincidence. As I joke, I said, "Okay, but if it's not a coincidence, do it twice in a row." I then said, I said twice in a row. It had never done that before. I stopped asking the car for things. I used to live in a cheap, sketchier, and older neighborhood. My room was upstairs, and I had a window facing my backyard. There were some leftover items from the last renters that I found, planks of wood, tools, and even a rusty butcher knife planted into the ground. The backyard had no fence surrounding it at all, and my parents needed to build one. I remember waking up many nights hearing footsteps in the backyard. They would walk slowly, always leading up to directly below and facing my window. I never looked, but I sensed that I was being watched. Then they would simply walk away. I told my parents desperately, but there wasn't really anything that they could do. A phone was found in our backyard around that time, and we returned it to a sketchy character saying that he was chasing after his dog and must have dropped it. Once a fence was built, I never heard the footsteps again. When I was younger, around 7 or 8, my mother, brother, and I were living in a very old flat in a city a few hours from London. It's a pretty old place, and there are slave trade memorials all over the city, especially close to where we lived. I used to have terrible night terrors, so my mom moved me into her bedroom. I remember it very clearly. It was a large room, and her bed was to the right of me, while my bed was vertical and facing the bedroom door. It was small, smaller than a regular single, and had metal railings all around it. No clue why, but I remember it always made me feel safe. I don't know how soon after I moved into my mom's room it started, but someone began visiting me. I say someone because this did not appear to be an entity or otherworldly creature. It looked like a man. Every night, I would lie awake clutching the covers desperately and waiting for him so I could scream. Don't ask me why I didn't scream first. My child brain think I was afraid if I screamed before I saw him he'd be mad. Every night I would hear boom boom boom, which was the sound of his boots on the stairs. He walked very slowly, so there was always about a 2-second gap between each step. Doesn't sound long to consider how quickly you actually walk up the stairs. The boom of his boots would continue until he reached the top, where he would slowly turn into my room. His boots would suddenly not make any noise, almost as if he wasn't even touching the floor. He was gray and faded, like a watercolor. He wore a straw hat that he had tipped over his eyes so the top of his face was hidden. Plus, his head was always slightly bent forward, as if he was looking at the floor. He wore dungarees and a shirt underneath that appeared tattered, and in his mouth was some kind of piece of hay or long grass or something, which he chewed as he walked. He would make his way slowly to my bed, not looking up or changing pace, and the scariest part was I could never tell if he knew I was there or not. I couldn't tell if he was just coming in my room because he wanted to be in that room or he was there for me. Either way, it was effing terrifying. I mentioned I had night terrors before because when I first saw him, I thought he was a night terror. But then I started staying awake, and I waited for him because I was too scared to fall asleep and wake up with him stood over me. I know he was real. I felt him. I felt the presence of another person. I heard him. I saw him. I would blink and then look, blink and look, and he'd still be there walking. Before he could get too close, I would scream. My mother would wake up, and I'd tell her he had come. Eventually, she went to my granddad, her dad, for help. She was genuinely scared and didn't know what to do. I was scared in the day and scared at night. I was a wreck. She's not a religious person per se, but she is highly spiritual. They believed he was a slave. I don't know exactly what they did, but I wasn't allowed in that room for a couple of days. My mother had frankincense and some other herbs, and they spent time in the room speaking light and positive incantations. She asked whoever he was not to harm me and to leave me because I was afraid. After that, he never came back. It was like he'd never been there. I'm 27 now. It's not exactly blood-curdling fear like it was back then, but every now and then, if I'm in my room and walk into a dark hallway, I shudder thinking about him and where he really came from. One time when I was 12, I was on the phone with a friend sitting outside when I saw a guy who was dressed funnily walk by. He was wearing a shirt that was the American flag. It didn't have the flag on it. It was the flag, lol. A big winter coat, this was in Texas during summer, and short shorts. I laughed and told my friend what I just saw. She was silent for a bit, so I asked if she was still there. In a confused and slightly concerned voice, she said, yeah, it's just that a guy wearing that exact same thing just walked past my house. When I asked her questions about his appearance, I nearly shat myself. This was the exact guy that just walked past my house. We live 30 minutes apart from each other, so there's absolutely no way this guy could be at both of our houses at the same time. This happened 6 years ago and creeps me out to this day. TLDR. A man wearing strange clothes walked by both me and a friend who lived 30 minutes away at the exact same time. I live in an apartment with an area people leave free things to take. I was going through a bad patch and I decided to force myself to at least walk down the stairs and get the mail just for exercise. I came down and I saw this painting someone had left. The best way to describe it is if someone drew a dog as a human on a yellow background with a big anime eyes. I don't know why, but it made me feel slightly better. So I took it up to my apartment. For the next few days, I felt like I was going insane. Like there was a voice in my head screaming all the time, asking me to save it. It seemed terrified. One day, I had an intense nightmare, and my mom woke me up, and I saw her eyes look like the painting, but I honestly didn't connect the two until my friend reminded me about the painting. I kept forgetting I had the painting for some reason. Eventually, I put it back downstairs, but even that was difficult. It felt really, really wrong, and I just felt like something was screaming into my head, terrified the entire time. The second I put it back and went upstairs, everything went back to normal. It was gone from the area the next day, but it would come back every few days and disappear like people were taking the painting and leaving it again. Then it just disappeared. I showed people pictures of the painting and no one understands why I wanted it. I don't even understand. It just seemed nice. If you were in possession of such an item, would you keep it, throw it away, or try to figure it out? When I was growing up, my family lived in a small 2-bedroom trailer. My older sister and I had one room while my parents shared the other. My mom was convinced that it was haunted. From her bed, she could see an old reclining chair in the living room. Some nights she would suddenly wake up and see an old man sitting in it, staring out the window. She'd always wake my dad and send him to go investigate. He'd stomp in the room and turn the empty chair around. This apparently happened quite a bit. I believe my sister also used to claim to see an old man standing in her closet. She was young enough that she doesn't remember much, so I don't have any more story there. Mom also swore that some days she'd hear giggling and see a little blonde girl running down the hallway. At first, he'd always assume it was me and go to investigate, only to find the house empty. We moved out of that trailer after a few years. I didn't know anything about this until years later when I was in college. One of my childhood friends and I were hanging out at my parents' place when a paranormal show came on. My dad made a joke about the wife in the show always sending her husband to investigate noises in the middle of the night before following it up with, "Who does that sound like?" After some prodding, I got my mom to tell the story. She sticks by her story and believes to this day, while the girl's spirit was friendly, the old man seemed malicious. If the story stopped there, I'd say it could just be my mom having an overactive imagination. However, my friend seemed freaked out by the story. She asked my parents where the trailer was. We lived in a small village, so it wasn't hard to pinpoint, and it turns out that one of her brother's best friends bought the trailer from the older couple that my parents had sold the place to. The whole family swore the place was haunted. They always talked about how a spirit of an old man would sit in a chair in the living room and stare at the window. The trailer passed through a number of different hands before burning down a few years ago. I have a few other weird stories, but this one is by far the hardest for me to explain.